What you're about to see is a little bit of the background work of what I do to accomplish two different things. One is how I examine a dead animal for the anatomy hunter to try to teach how to make the perfect kill shot. Number two, as a sculptor for Revolution Taxidermy Supply, how I examine an animal, the carcass of the animal, and position it and measure it to be able to make a taxidermy mannequin. This one is custom made for the bear that I shot in the exact position that I shot it at. When this is done, this is going to be mounted with the ribs and the lungs and everything in place. So you'll get to see just a summary of some of the background information of how I do it. This may be boring to some, but to others it may be very interesting because it's interesting to me, or I would not be doing it. Okay, the first thing we did is we weighed the bear. He weighed 230 pounds. We drug him into the cooler there. We put him up on the table, and then we ended up putting our license on him. As long as we had our license marked when we were in the woods, I'm with the outfitter Mark Clucci at Raleigh Lake Lodge, and then we tagged it afterwards. Okay? Then this section here, what we did here is, which is different as we started to skin the animal, is when you go to an outfitter and you shoot a bear, they generally will skin it for you or have somebody else, you pay somebody to come in to cut it up to skin it for you. What they will do is they will skin the bear down to where the feet start, to the ankles, to the wrist, and they cut them off. And then that whole hide goes to the taxidermist, and then the taxidermist, they take all the bones, all the toes out of the paws. And that takes a lot of work, and it's a pain, and it's tricky. You cut a bunch of holes there. Well, I had to do it on the whole carcass first, and the reason's very important. I'm going to take this bear, and I'm going to mount him, and as a sculptor, I'm going to make my own form from scratch. I'm not going to buy one. I'm going to reproduce it in the same position this was at. So what I needed to do is have all his toes on him so I could position him in the way that he was when I shot him. And so I needed his feet there to do it. And you'll see later on the process where I actually took his feet and I screwed them down to a board to hold them the way that I wanted. So, and I had to do it sitting down like that. I got a bad back and bad knee, so it's kind of a pain. But when it's all said and done, it worked out fantastic. Okay? So then the next thing what we did is, since I'm wanting to make a sculpture perfectly of this bear, and he's gutted, I need perfect measurements. That's one of the secrets I had in the bear forms when I owned Revolution Taxidermy Supply. The sculptures I did, my bear mannequins fit very well, even though bears vary. But for the most part, my bear forms fit excellent because I was very particular on my measurements. And so for me to make a perfect measurement on the belly of this bear, since it was gutted after it was skinned out, is what I did is we actually put a plastic bag inside the bear, and we ended up putting towels in there, and we sewed him up. And that's literally just so I can get the shape measurement. I need the circumference measurement. I also need to know the depth measurement from the top to the bottom and the width measurement side to side. And by putting that back in him, filling his guts basically back in, that allowed me to get the perfect measurements. It's a tremendous amount of work that we go through just to get things a little better than what other people would do. And then a note, I think many people in the taxidermy industry, when they sculpture products, they take somebody else's products and they alter them, or nobody knows the difference. In other words, they cheat. Everything we did, we've always done our homework with going back to the real carcass, the real measurements. We study the live animals. We do it all ourselves. And so the information that I have learned by being self-taught and by being with the animals, I've learned it actually from the animals. And the information I know, nobody can tell me any difference because it's what I know for 100% fact. Okay? So now we got him all sewed up there. Then what do we do next here, Gavin? Okay, now we're taking him here. Now that he's skinned, I left the skin up around his head still because I need to put that back over his body for some other things we're going to do. I just took a piece of plywood and I screwed another piece of plywood to it at a 90-degree angle so I could screw his feet to that. And that's what this next process is, because I need to put him in the exact position he was so I literally can make a pattern so I can make my mannequin. So, and again, a tremendous amount of work to get it right, but when I get it right, I can get it really right. I use the word perfection, but perfection is in the context of a human being that is not perfect to be as perfect as a non-perfect person can be. That's confusing. Think about it. It will make sense to you. Okay? So then we got them all in position here. Get them all screwed down. My washers are nothing but pieces of plywood. But when it's all said and done, what you're going to see is he's screwed down in the exact position he was. The best that I could do is when I shot him. Okay?
To be able to see how much, when the fur is put back on his carcass here, how much does that look like the real bear?
Yeah, see, because what I'm trying to do is accomplish two things. One, I'm trying to get measurements and to sculpture him for taxidermy. And then now as well, I'm taking a look at studying him anatomically with this fur on him for the anatomy hunter. So I'm kind of doing two different things at the same time, because in all these animals I do, remember there's three animals in an animal. The outside animal is the fur. You take the fur off, then you have the inside animal, which is the carcass. Then inside the carcass is the thorax cavity where we shoot where the lungs and the heart are. That's the third bear that's inside there. So there's a bear and a bear and a bear. And I need to have the measurements on all of them. So we'll keep going. We put the hide back on him. We got to line the hole up where I shot him. And if you notice that, I mean, it's obvious that that shot is high, and it's obvious that it's forward. And when I was shooting my crossbow, it was sighted in perfect. So the gentleman who owned it to let me use it said, don't move it. But when I pulled the trigger, because I punch it, I shot high into the right, high into the right. So it's exactly, here's where I would have hit, and that's exactly where I hit him, was high into the right. So anyway, so we go through the process, putting the skin back on there, making it all lined up. And then from there, we're going to go down the road on our journey, and we're going to show you how we take measurements. Because what we wanted to find out is, where is the middle of the bear? How do you measure when you've got a rounded object? How do you measure exactly where the middle is? And it was something I tried. I had different ways of doing it, but I came up with a way that is so simple, so fast, so easy, and so perfect. That's pretty slick. So we'll just show you what we did there. And I can fast forward this, which Gavin doesn't care because he's going to move for me. But we're going to do it here. So we got the bear all lined up. We got everything we want. And so what I did is I take a piece of foam, and basically I measure the height of the bear. If he was standing up from his belly fur to his top fur there, I take that measurement, and then I take how high he is off the table, like the top of this cup, how that is, and I cut a rectangle out. But if you notice, there's a line right down the middle. So when I fit that back over him, that line gives me the exact middle. And then from there, I end up putting screws in his ribs. So as I work on him, I know exactly where the dead middle of that animal is. In this situation, what I did is I didn't put the screws in. The bear ribs are so skinny. What I do is I take a drill first, and I drilled holes in the ribs. So I didn't put the screws in the video, but you'll be able to see the holes there that I can put the screws in later. So it's the same thing. It shows me exactly where the middle of it is. Because for me to teach where a perfect shot is, you've got to look at a deer, you got to look at a bear, say that elk on the table. Well, what do you use for references? And one of the references is, if you know where the middle of the animal is, then from the middle of the animal, I can reference higher or lower depending on how high you are in a tree or wherever you're at. So I need that as a foundation starting point where the middle of the bear is. Now from the middle of the bear, I then end up going to the middle of the thorax cavity, which on this hunt, we got kicked out of this shed here quick because another bear was coming in, and so we ran out of time, and I failed to take the measurement in the middle of the thorax cavity. You're not supposed to admit your faults, but I try to be pretty honest, and I admit I'm not perfect, and I made every one of these animals that I dissect, I make mistakes. Okay, so there we are drilling it out. We're going to go ahead here next. Now what I wanted to do is, when you shoot a deer, you generally line up behind the front leg and you go straight up. That's a reference point we use. Well, on a bear, they're trickier because you can do that on a bear, but a lot of the time the bears round out and they hunch up. So that's what he did. So what I did is I took two measurements. One, which would be 90 degrees to the way his body was facing. If you can figure where his neck is here, that head actually came down a little bit more when I pulled it. They've got spring action to them and they're dead. And then I did a 90 degree there right behind the leg. And then I also did a 90 degree perpendicular with the ground there. and I ended up putting in two. I ended up putting in 2 pieces of green poster board we cut in strips to be able to show it. Okay, and then I fast forwarded some of this. The bear's screwed down. We've got all their foam on them. Got them lifted up so we can get underneath there to be able to make a pattern of him. And it's on all these different things. We take photographs from all different angles, and you can see we take the measurement, because what happens is in taxidermy you have, say, a circumference measurement of his neck is, say, is 28 inches, but the 28 inches you don't know how it's shaped. So I need to know if this is, say, 28 inches here. I need to know how far it is from this finger to this finger and how wide it is from here to here, so I can get the proper shape. Because you can make something 28 inches fit perfect, but the shape of it is wrong. And so bears actually have necks that are flatter. You think of everything round, but a bear actually has a flatter neck from the top to the bottom and wider on the sides, more kind of like you think of a cobra than you would think of as a deer. So then what we're doing here is we're taking it apart to try to start showing the bear on the inside. So I took the meat off the ribs, but I left the meat right here where I shot him. Because what we're wanting to know is, did I hit the shoulder blade? How close to the backbone did it hit? Because we know I was high and forward from where I wanted to shoot. So the question is, how far forward, how high? So we take them apart. We worked all this through, and if I wouldn't have been up in a tree and he would have been perfectly level and I would have shot in, I would have hit him in the backbone. But since I was up in a tree, I came above him and I got to go below the backbone. Because I was forward, I did not hit the aorta, because the aorta comes forward, goes up to the backbone, and goes back. But I was forward of that. So, okay, so there we have the explanation there. And then we proceeded to take the meat off, and there you can see the holes in the ribs where I drilled them, and this is the middle of it being at a 90-degree angle, and this was the middle of the height of the bear being perpendicular. Oh, actually, these holes here, those are the ones that I also cut in for where the heart is. So, because I'll take where, say, the heart is on an animal too, and I'll actually drill holes in the ribs there to be able to show where the heart is, because I need permanent reference, and the ribs are a permanent reference that I have on everything that I do. So, okay, so we're going in there and I'm dissecting on everything, actually by feeling what my broadhead hit as it went through. Okay, and unfortunately I hit the trachea, so when we went to inflate the lungs, all the air leaked right out because I hit it right in the dead middle, and those Exodus broadheads make such a perfect cut. I should have saved that to be able to show it, because it's almost fake how perfect the holes are. Okay, then we move along here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to slowly start opening up, and we're going to start taking, this is the humerus bone that goes from the shoulder knuckle here. It's called the glenohumeral joint. That goes down here to the olecranon, or the elbow. And I'm taking all this out nice and slow so you can start referencing where the bones are of the shoulder bones in relationship to the rest of the bear. Okay? So we go along a little quicker there. And then what I did is I measured from the edge of the spine of the scapula to where my shot was, to see how much far forward that I could go. The interesting thing is the bears have got 2 spines of the scapula. They got a major one in the middle, they got another one here, and it's actually over here. I didn't skin all the way over here till later, because I'm used to being a deer that this would be the edge, the rear leading edge of the scapula, but actually it's another spine, and it actually comes over there closer. So I was closer to it than I wanted to admit. Because the reality is, when I'm making these shots, just because I'm trying to teach what the perfect shot is, that doesn't mean I can do it any better than anybody else. That's the reality. Okay, we're going to go a little bit more forward here. We're going to clean off the bones a little bit more. And there you can start seeing the other spine of the scapula opening up there. Instead of that being the edge of the scapula, that ends up coming up there. And so I was actually closer to that than we thought. Okay? Now, unfortunately, we were not able to inflate the lungs to be able to show you how far the lungs go back. I do have other photos, which I've not revealed yet to the public, and of exactly how far that they can go back. So, but some of the points on this here, I think as this goes on to the end, that we actually took off the shoulder blade. I think on some of these photos we did. And then we numbered the ribs. Yeah, see, this is it right here. This is the one that we turn it. What I want you to see is on a bear, I can't slide that photo back anymore, but Gavin, if you can get the front of this. The reason, there's a number of reasons why you shoot a bear back farther than you do a deer. Now, when I first got into this, I saw the lungs on a bear real far forward. You got to shoot a bear forward. Well, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. The lungs go back farther on a bear than they do on a deer. And here's the other reason why you don't want to shoot tight right behind the shoulder. If you take a look at these ribs here, they come, that first rib, they come super narrow. If you take a look at a line from there to there, it's kind of like a rounded triangle. If it was a deer, this would be much bigger. So if you shoot right behind the front leg here, the distance from the top to the bottom is very narrow. If you go back farther into here, you've got a much larger target, and the lungs do go back farther. So I'm all about trying to find what the largest kill zone area is, so we can shoot at the middle of that and still miss high, low, right, or left and get it. So unfortunately on this bear, I did not get to inflate the lungs to show that, but this still shows the cavity here, and I mean how small it is that it comes in the front. So I think from where we're at here, Gavin, this dog will hunt. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, now I want to point out a few things that are different between bear ribs and deer ribs, because this is I go through this and we come up with a perfect kill shot placement where that's at. This is going to have some importance right now. I'm kind of building a story of where I'm going with this. So let's take a look at, these are deer ribs. Two major things I want you to look at is how thick these ribs are, and this is from a 2.5-year-old Wisconsin buck. And I want you to see the height of this first rib, okay? Now as I take this bear, and this bear was 230 pounds live weight, and it could have been 300 pounds in the fall because he was, you know, he didn't have the muscle mass on him. So he's probably bigger than this deer. Take a look at how much skinnier the bear ribs are. I would say they're about a third the width, a third the size, a third the circumference of deer ribs. They're that small, which is another reason if you're shooting a bear and you're shooting back, you can end up with using a bigger broadhead for penetration because of the size of the ribs. Now, the other thing I want you to notice is, look at the size of the first rib on a bear compared to a deer. Take a look at the whole shape of the bear ribs. Do you see how it's kind of pear-shaped? Do you see how where it's the roundest, where it goes back farther? And then look at how narrow it comes in the front. Okay? So now I'm going to set these down, and I'm going to take this out of here, and now take a look in here, and take a look at how as this descends. Look at how narrow this is. That's the ball socket right there. That's where the first rib fits there. Look how narrow that is. So the farther forward that you shoot, look at how much smaller your target becomes. So again, you go back too far and you end up hitting the guts. That's wrong as well. But aiming forward on a bear with all this meat and all this fur, it's very easy to think you make a perfect shot and you didn't get the bear. In fact, I know a guy this year, a professional, that shot a bear, thought he had him, he hit him forward. It turned out he didn't even touch the bear at all because the bear has so much fur, and you can see as you come back how much bigger it gets. So keep that in mind as I do my teaching. It's going to probably be next summer that's going to deal with scientifically, absolutely within 1/4 of an inch where the perfect shot is, that's going to give you the largest kill shot possible so you can shoot high, low, right, or left and still kill the animal. That's what Brian Johnson's I'm all made up to be able to accomplish that goal. because then you will know where to aim, and guess what? You will kill that animal instead of wounding it because you know exactly where to aim. So that's where we're going.
Okay.
Okay, now let's take a look at where I'm at with this bear, where I'm at in progress. This is right now, we're in the end of October. It's been almost a year, about a year and a quarter since I shot him in June in 2022. So I just want to show you with the first video you saw where I started taking different measurements. I laid him down and I propped him. Where was I going with that? I'll just show you where I'm at now. When I'm done, this is going to be mounted. We're going to have the lungs and the liver and the heart in here. We're going to have the other ribs on this side. And this is all going to be fur here, except we're going to cut the fur right here. And we're going to cut the fur right here so you can actually see the bear. Remember we talked about the 3 different bears? You're going to have the fur bear up here. And then this is the carcass bear that you're going to see. And then inside that, this is the thorax cavity bear that goes from here to here. So let's take a look at a few things of what I did. When we came back, I literally molded his head. Now, why in the world would I mold the head of a bear and reproduce it out of fiberglass? Honestly, the reason is, for me, when I mount him and I do what I do, remember, I'm fanatic on having perfect measurements because you can't have perfect fit skins in taxidermy without perfect fits. And the difference between a taxidermy sculptor and a sculpture like I did in chainsaw carving, or a sculptor that does archery targets like I do, they can just look good. But the taxidermy ones, the skin has to fit. The measurements have to be on the money to make this work. So it's kind of going crazy that I went this far, but it's just kind of the way that I guess I'm kind of used to doing things. So what we did is remember we traced out the bear, so this gives me my outside profile. What I did is we boiled all the bones and we inserted in my carving. I carved half the bear. Actually, I carved, I think, the whole bear. Then I cut this part out, hollowed it out to fit them ribs in there perfect. Okay. I then took all these legs, and you can even see on the back side of this one over here, I actually molded some of the feet. So if I mold the foot on one of them, that can give me a reference for doing the other ones. Now, let's take a look at some other things in here. These are the actual ribs of the bear. These are not reproduced. Those are those. Those are them. Okay, now, you see the hole that's cut out of here? And again, all of this is in progress. There's a long ways to go, so you see little flaws here. Give me a little bit of breathing room. On the inside here is the shoulder blade and the glenohumeral joint. I actually made a mold of that that's reproduced. And when this is all done, you're going to be able to look in here and you're going to actually see the shoulder blade where I missed it and where it's actually at. That's going to show the dimension of the meat that's between the ribs and the shoulder blade. Now, if you take a look at this hole here, I just put a metal arrow shaft in there to be able to show where I hit it. But if you take a look up above here, do you see this? That is actual meat that when we cleaned all these ribs meticulously, you can even see the false ribs down here, they pulled away as they shrank. That's the exact hole where I hit it. I mean, that is the hole that's in the ribs that I reproduced it. You can see, remember I drilled the holes in the ribs? There's the holes in the ribs that I drilled right there. These give me a permanent reference on anything I do where this is at. Okay? So now let's take a look at some other additives to this as well. This here is the humerus bone. This is the scapula. If you remember, I said I measured from this point of where my distance was on my bear, and I was wrong because I say they have 2 spines of the scapula. This would be the forward or primary spine of the scapula. This I would call the rear or secondary spine of the scapula. That's my terminology. This big old honking joint right here, this in a deer, any wildlife with all of this area, this is the area you do not want to hit because this is bad. You don't, and this is called together the glenohumeral joint. Well, I made that so when it's mounted, that's going to fit right in there like that. So you'll actually be able to see the black fur there. You see that fitting in there. You see the ribs there. These ribs here are going to end up fitting on the inside. Now this will show you what I have to do. They don't fit right now. Okay? So what I have to do is I have to trim this fiberglass here. I have to trim this foam here. So this will fit in here. So all of these ribs here, because the ribs are actually jointed. I tell people that ribs have joints and ball and sockets. They wouldn't believe me. But you see all these are all the sockets. I have to fit this in here so that lines up perfect with that. by trimming this and trimming that. And then when I'm done, lo and behold, look what we have. This is the hole where my arrow, my broadhead exited right there. And that's the actual meat. And these are the actual ribs. And that's why with my documentation project, I'm trying as much as I can to use the real animal, the real ribs, the real bones as much as possible, and not a reproduction, because these don't lie. Okay, so this is going to end up going in there. You can see I'm high. I've got to come way down and cut the. That's all the stuff that takes forever to take these things as a piece of a puzzle, and I've got to make them fit. So you can see I've still got to go down here about 1.5 inches there. Okay, so then I'll show you a few other things that we did. Put that back in there. This is the nose. Now I reproduced the nose in the bear because in taxidermy nowadays you'll see a lot of. I think a great deal of the bears that are mounted, they have reproduction noses. But again, I like to do everything myself. So this is a mold of the actual nose of this bear that I shot. Now, am I going to use it on this bear mount? No. Why not? Well, take a look at the position of the head. It's on the ground. Nobody in the world is ever going to see it. So I kind of did this for nothing, but this is all great reference for me to be able to end up having. So, okay. So let's see, what else do we have here? Okay. This is a deer heart, but I have this here when I end up doing the heart of the bear. I'll end up having the heart that's going to go right back in here where that's going to fit in there. And that's where, again, where these holes were cut or were drilled with the drill bit. That gives me the reference where this fits back in there. So, but what I need to do is I need to get another bear that I can blow the lungs up with. And I'm hopefully going to go on 2 bear hunts this next spring. And with hopefully quite a few people, so I'll have plenty of bears hopefully to be able to get my more reference there for a bear as far as the lungs go. And then I do have a liver in the freezer of a bear that's exactly this size to be able to go by. In Canada, my bear, which has the gallbladder attached to it, which is people collect gallbladders and sell them, and it's highly illegal. So I literally took the liver, which I needed desperately, but I took it with a gallbladder and I threw it away. I didn't even want to touch it because I don't want to have any I don't want to get in any trouble at all, especially in another country. So I think that's showing all the different things of the stage where we're at now that'll help you understand the different measurements and all the crazy thing I did by taking their toes there and screwing them down. That all gives me when it's attached for everybody. Oh yes, do you see how this foot's up off the ground? If you go back and you watch the video when I shot him, I'm trying to reproduce him right. His left foot here was actually on the root of the tree that he was standing behind. So actually when I make a base for him, I got to come up with some sort of a root or something there to do it. So, but the point being, I'm trying to reproduce the bear exactly as how you saw him on the video. So then when you see where the arrow hit him and you see this here, you get to correspond that, wow, that bear there on the video that was alive, this is him here, and that's the hole where it came in and where it came out. Everything we're doing is trying to be documented. I'm trying to make it perfect. There's one problem. I'm not perfect, so it can't be perfect. But what it can be is as perfect as an imperfect person can be. That I can do.